Hello, everyone. Uh, Welcome. Dr. Howard Resnick, also known as H.D. Goswami or Hridayananda Goswami, a Harvard PhD in Sanskrit and Indian studies, had already translated several volumes of the Sanskrit epic Srimad Bhagavatam, widely considered as the most exalted among the Puranas, before getting his academic credentials. Somewhat recently, he published a novel entitled Justin Davis, following the acclaimed comprehensive guide to the Bhagavad Gita, which has been already translated into 7 languages, and also a book compiled from lectures named Quest for Justice, as well as numerous articles and important academic papers. Great Bharata, what we are introducing today, is the first of several books written by Dr. Resnick, who has elucidated the ancient epic Mahabharata with its mix of intrigue, romance, betrayal, nobility, exile, revenge, mysticism, war, and duty. This is a result of years of historical, linguistic, and geographical research. A unique work of art, and very likely the prolific author's magnum opus. The book will be in print by spring of this year. Today we are launching the audiobook with a spirited and dramatic narration by the author himself. Great Bharata consists of 10 hours of historical and exciting adventures, deftly depicted the characters' strong and noble emotions, both heroes and villains, discovering for us an exalted culture whose philosophy is current and useful, and teaching us a plethora of important subjects, contributing to our understanding of the world we live in, and giving us a clear map to our improvement as human beings. Dr. Edwin Bryant of Rutgers University wrote, "The story begs rendering into a wholly Bollywood blockbuster for which this edition would make the perfect script." The link to purchase the book will be posted during the streaming. And now let us hear from Dr. Resnick, H.D. Goswami himself.
So, do I speak now, or are you going to interview me?
No, I already said enough.
I guess basically my message is that I hope everyone enjoys the book. It was an amazing experience. I was going to say writing. I think it's probably better to say discovering it. As I explained in the introduction to the book, there's a somewhat elaborate introduction explaining the challenge of trying to recover the original story of the Mahabharata. We do know the basic story, but over thousands of years of time, text was lost, and sort of text that was not original was interpolated, was placed in, and so there were text issues trying to recover the original text. And not only do modern scholars talk about this a lot, but even 800 years ago, Madhvacharya in Southwest India talks about this in a book he wrote on the Mahabharata. Krishna talks about this in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says that he originally spoke this wisdom to Vivaswan, and then it came down in parampara, disciplic succession, that over time, sakali neha mahata yoga nashta parantapa, that the real knowledge, the real spiritual science was lost over a great period of time. And so you find even in the ancient literature, and also in the words of the great teachers of the Vaishnava tradition, this acknowledgement that over time original text can be lost or corrupted. And so in a sense, trying to do this book was a type of linguist or literary archaeology, you might say, and by studying the geography and by comparing the text against the same stories as they appear in other ancient texts, including the Bhagavatam, other Puranas, and so on and so forth. And I think a bit of common sense also. When you start to look at where these things happened and who these people were and what their relationships were, either as friends or enemies or family. And I think I was really blessed. It just becomes clear, and the story emerges. So one thing about the Mahabharata, which I've done, it's sort of a, the title of it, I call it Great Bharata, because great is the literal translation of Maha. So Mahabharata simply means Great Bharata. And I thought if there was one English word there with a Sanskrit word, it'd be easier for non-Sanskrit speakers to understand what's going on. So Great Bharata really, Mahabharata means Great Bharata. And it is very much you could call it the people's book. It was a book written for people in general. There are other great texts, like perhaps the greatest is the Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam. And the Bhagavatam is certainly understandable, especially when presented by a great teacher like Prabhupada. But it has a lot of advanced theology. It goes into the intricacies of serious philosophical theology quite often, and which leaves a lot of people behind. There are not a lot of people in the world today who stay up at night because they just love theology. As we know, we live in a very different world nowadays. So the Mahabharata is really like a book for the people, for everyone. It's a book for everyone. It has great stories, romance, and battles and tragedies and redemption. It's really, it was meant to be, when it was originally composed thousands of years ago by Vyasa, it was meant to be a book for everyone. Everyone could understand the stories. Everyone could enter into the stories, and by doing so, enter really a spiritual atmosphere. And in sort of, like in Mary Poppins, that song, "A little bit of sugar makes the medicine go down." So the medicine in this case is the great wisdom, the great knowledge of who we really are as eternal souls, how we can be liberated, what God is, what is our relationship with God. So all these things are presented sort of in a painless, sugar-coated way through a great story. And so I've tried to preserve the original intention of the text, which is to not let the theology or the philosophy interfere with the dramatic progress of the story, but at the same time, not to hide the message, not to let the story itself overwhelm the message so you don't really know what the message was supposed to be. So I've tried to keep that balance between the great message of the Mahabharata and the great story it tells, so that by entering into the story, emotionally getting involved in the story with the characters, you are painlessly being spiritually medicated, and you can get a foothold in the process of self-realization. So, no spoilers. Hope you'll listen to the book. I hope you'll like it. I narrated it myself because, well, to be honest, I auditioned several professional narrators, but just didn't feel that they really connected with the story. And in fairness to these people who are, professionals, unless you pay an exorbitant amount of money, like, a lot of money, a fortune, to get established actors, Hollywood, to narrate these things, then you get people who are who are good. I mean, they definitely know their craft. They're able to narrate, but they're not going to take, as serious actors do if they're involved in a movie, they're not going to take a few months to just really dive into the story, to live inside the story, to make it their own story, so that when they narrate it, they really become the people in the story. Uh, you don't get that if you just, if you just pay someone to narrate your story. A professional, like I said, they're honest and they are talented and professional, but they're not going to take the time it takes to really live inside the story as professional actors do when, let's say, they do a serious movie. So I finally decided that, well, maybe I'll do it myself, give it a try. And um, I think it came out well. Probably a little better than I expected, but I think it did come out well. Anyway, so that's what it is. I won't say more. I'll let you listen to the story. And Sarvama, if you come back in here, uh, the master of ceremonies. So, any questions or anything else we can do? Or
I know you're a perfectionist, and you took quite some time to work on this. Even before you started writing, you did a lot of research and geographical, historical, linguistic, and so on. Um, are you satisfied with the result? Would you change anything?
no, no. I just would have wished myself a little more intelligent, 30 years ago. Actually, I first. This is kind of embarrassing, but maybe it'll encourage other people to take a long time to fulfill their dreams. But I first started working on this. Not quite, almost, roughly a little less than 40 years ago. Little less than 40 years ago, after I finished the Bhagavatam, actually, I had the idea that, because I translated the Bhagavatam with the commentaries, finishing Prabhupada's work, and then naturally I thought, okay, what next? Now what? Because I felt that I shouldn't just give up this service of translating and presenting this ancient literature. So I was in India, in Vrindavan, so when I went back to Delhi before flying out, I went to a bookstore and bought the Sanskrit text of the Mahabharata, the critical edition, the smaller one that doesn't have all the variant readings of the text that were not put as the main text. So, and then I started reading it. I started reading the Mahabharata, and then I started translating it. Ultimately, I translated about 300 chapters of it. And the reason we didn't publish it just as a literal translation is that, well, one day when I was living in Southern California, I had a guest came over to visit me, and that was the person you quoted from Rutgers, Edwin Bryant, also known as Advaita Prabhu, who is a very respected scholar in Indology. And so we were talking at my place. We were just talking about the Mahabharata, and he said to me, like, why are you going to just do a literal translation of this huge text? And then he pointed out that, there are problems with the text, and people really understand it in the original version, Sanskrit. And so don't remember all that conversation, but somehow when I spoke to him, I was convinced that I thought, yeah, I think that I have to present it in a way that will really get through to people and compensate for some of the text corruptions which Madhvacharya spoke about. So then I got the idea that I had to present this. I guess the genre, sort of a reconstructed history. You could call it a historical novel, although I think it's a historical novel is a novel that's based usually pretty closely on real history. Let's say the writer will study the real history and then kind of write a novel about the characters, filling in gaps or maybe embellishing certain things or dramatizing certain things. And so, where'd you go, Sir Rahman? So I don't think this is. I wouldn't call it exactly historical novel. It's an attempt to reconstruct the history and then to dramatize it. And so I think I had to grow into the service. I had to sort of live with the story for years and come to a point where I guess it was the time, for everything there's a season. And so by Krishna's mercy, the time came for me to do this, and now here it is. And of course, I'm busily working on the second volume right now.
Two things. One, in your defense, when Vyasadeva wrote the Bhagavatam, is described that it was in his maturity. So there is somewhat of a
Tradition.
Not that everybody should write as soon as they can, but when they're ready. And I guess this is a time for you. The other one is that how, because in our tradition, there is a lot of emphasis on not modifying the voice of the writer, but you had to extrapolate and be guided sometimes by inspiration because of lack of information or because of corruption in the text. So do you feel satisfied after having done that? Do you feel any sort of, do you have any second thoughts or feel any sort of
actually no. And just a detail, the Vyasa's original composition of the story, not composition, his really recording, he really just documented what happened. He didn't write anything. There are Hindu legends about Vyas dictating to Ganesh, which is a very nice story. The only problem with it is it's not in the Mahabharata. And we know actually for a fact that 5,000 years ago, roughly, when these events took place, that India was an oral society. It was a brilliant society, intellectually brilliant, but an oral society. Things were, and actually, if you look at all the places in the Bhagavatam, and there are many, where it talks about Vyas composing the Mahabharata, it never mentions writing. In fact, writing is not mentioned in the entire Bhagavatam, which is a large work. No one writes anything. It's an oral society. And so, no, I have no regrets. You come back in 10 years, maybe I'll think, oh my God, I should have done this or that. But no, in general, at the risk of sounding pretentious, as I was writing it, I did feel inspired by Krishna. And I feel strongly, I believe that something like what I've written is what actually happened. So that's of course a personal conviction, but I am convinced that as you hear the story, something like this really happened. So I'm happy with the result, which I consider to be a blessing. I think it would be hypocritical for me to claim to be a spiritual practitioner and then to take credit for something which was really inspired by persons much greater than me. So yes, I am happy with it. I feel it's the best that could be done, certainly the best that I could do.
Well, I certainly commend you on your effort, and I had the privilege, the blessing of hearing the the first draft of it from you, as you would call me and my wife and read us whatever chapters you were writing at the time. So I heard it. I heard the audiobook in person, and it was fascinating. I've read everything you have written, and I think without a doubt this is your magnum opus, and I hope it becomes very popular and turns into a blockbuster movie and sells millions of copies. Hopefully it will put you in the position that you largely deserve as a writer, as a thinker, as a philosopher, as a historian.
Well, as they say in Brazil, Deus te ouça.
Hmm.
May God hear you. So I hope for the right reasons that it does become very successful.
Okay, well, thank you very much to all of those who will listen to this stream live and those who listen to it afterwards. Our thanks to Hridayananda Goswami for his contribution to the betterment of humanity.
Thank you.
Thank you.